Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we journey back to 18th century rural England, to a time before central heating, before electricity, before the comforts we take for granted today. We will explore, in quiet detail, how ordinary people survived the coldest months of the year. This is not a story of drama or danger. Rather, it is a gentle exploration of daily life, of small preparations, of routines developed over centuries. Let us settle in together, as families once did by their hearths, and learn about the slow, and careful work of staying warm when winter winds blow cold. Take a deep breath. Let yourself relax. There is no hurry here. We have all the time we need. Our story begins not in winter, but in the golden light of late autumn, when the first chill begins to touch the morning air. In a small village in the English countryside, let us imagine it somewhere in Oxfordshire, though it could be anywhere, families begin their preparations. The cottage we will visit is typical of its time. Stone walls, 2 feet thick in places, built to last. A thatched roof, dark with age, that must be maintained each year. Small windows, their glass thick and wavy, letting in precious little light. And inside, 2 rooms downstairs, a kitchen with its great hearth and a small parlour, and 2 rooms above, reached by a narrow wooden staircase worn smooth by generations of feet. In this cottage lives a family. Let us call them the Thatchers. Thomas Thatcher, a farm labourer. His wife, Mary, their 3 children, young Tom, aged 12, Alice, 10, and baby William, just 2 years old. Also living with them is Mary's elderly mother, whom everyone calls Old Meg, though her Christian name is Margaret. As September fades into October, the work of preparation begins. This work is not rushed. It unfolds at the pace of the seasons themselves, a rhythm as old as these rolling hills. Gathering firewood. Thomas rises before dawn, as he always does. The air is cool, and his breath makes small clouds in the darkness of the bedroom. He dresses quietly, not wanting to wake Mary or the baby, though he can hear little William's soft breathing in the cradle near their bed. The wooden floorboards creak under his weight. They always do, no matter how carefully he steps. Downstairs, he finds young Tom already awake, sitting by the hearth, where a few coals still glow from last night's fire. The boy has learned to wake early to help with the morning tasks. Together, father and son step out into the blue-grey light of pre-dawn. The village is silent, except for a rooster crowing somewhere down the lane. Frost has touched the grass, turning each blade silver. Winter is coming. Today, as on many autumn days, they will gather wood. Not just any wood, but specific pieces, collected with care. Dead branches from the hedgerows, fallen timber from the common land, twisted roots pulled from the ground after storms. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is taken that might be needed elsewhere. They work slowly, methodically. Young Tom carries a rope sling over his shoulder, while Thomas has a small axe and a saw. They walk to the edge of Squire Hartley's woods, Not into them, for that would be poaching, but along the verges where they are permitted to collect deadfall. The work is steady. Thomas shows young Tom how to test a branch to know if it will burn well. Green wood hisses and smokes. Wet wood is heavy and troublesome. But dry seasoned wood, that burns clean and hot. They look for oak and ash, beech and elm. Each wood has its qualities. Oak burns slow and steady. Ash will burn even when green, though not as well. Beech gives good heat. They gather until their bundles are full, then carry them home. The sun is well up now, pale and thin. They will stack this wood carefully in the lean-to shed beside the cottage, arranging it so air can move between the pieces, helping it dry further. This is just one day's work. There will be many more days like this, all through autumn, building up their supply. They need enough wood to last from November through March, 5 long months. A prodigious amount. Thomas reckons they will need 3 or 4 large cartloads, perhaps more if the winter is harsh. The turf stack, but wood alone is not enough. In this part of England, families also burn turf, squares of peat cut from the common land and dried in the summer sun. Thomas had cut their turf back in June, when the weather was dry and the days were long. Now, in October, those turfs are properly dried, dark and crumbly, smelling of earth and ancient vegetation. The turf stack stands behind the cottage, protected by a rough thatched cover that Thomas built years ago. Each turf is about the size of a large book, perhaps 9 inches square and 4 inches thick. They are stacked with care, with spaces between them for air to circulate. Mary uses turf for the slow-burning overnight fire. You bank a fire with turf before bed, covering it with ash, and in the morning you can find living coals beneath, ready to be coaxed back to flame. It is economical. It is reliable. And it provides a steady, moderate heat that is sometimes more useful than the fierce blaze of dry wood. The turf stack is a comforting sight. Dark and solid, it represents security, fuel for the cold months ahead. Closing off the parlour. As the days grow shorter and the nights grow colder, the Thatcher family begins to retreat into a smaller space. The parlour, that second room downstairs which holds their best furniture, a wooden settle, small table, 2 chairs, will not be used until spring. One grey afternoon, Mary and old Meg work together to prepare the room for its winter hibernation. They move carefully, for old Meg's joints are stiff with age and damp weather. First, they sweep the room thoroughly. Dust and cobwebs are cleared away. The windows are checked for drafts. Mary takes old rags, pieces of worn-out clothing too far gone for other use, and stuffs them into any gaps around the window frame. Every crack and crevice must be sealed. They hang a heavy woolen curtain across the doorway between the parlour and the kitchen. This curtain, made from an old blanket, will stay in place all winter. It serves as a barrier, trapping warmth in the kitchen and preventing cold air from seeping through from the unused room. "There now," says Mary, smoothing the curtain into place. "That will do us nicely." Old Meg nods. She remembers winters far worse than recent ones. The winter of 1740, when she was a young woman, when the Thames froze solid and people starved. She does not speak of it, but the memory is there, cold as ice. The upstairs will also be abandoned, more or less. The family will still sleep there. There is no choice, really, as the beds are there. But they will dress downstairs by the fire, and they will heat bricks to warm their beds before climbing under the covers. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the cottage is contracting around its heart. The great hearth in the kitchen, where fire burns day and night from October to April. Let us now spend time considering the hearth itself, for it is the center of everything during these cold months. It is not merely a source of heat, but a focal point of life, a gathering place, a cooking station, and a symbol of home itself. The hearth in the thatcher's cottage is large by modern standards. The opening is perhaps 5 feet wide and 3 feet high, built into the end wall of the kitchen. The stones are blackened with centuries of smoke, for this cottage is old, built, Thomas believes, sometime in the late 1600s, perhaps earlier. The stones retain heat, radiating warmth even when the fire burns low. Building the fire. Each morning, Mary rises first. The house is cold and dark. She wraps a shawl around her shoulders and makes her way carefully down the narrow stairs, feeling her way in the darkness. The kitchen is the coldest room in the cottage now, for the fire has burned down to ash and embers during the night. She kneels before the hearth. Her knees protest. She is not yet old, but years of work have taken their toll. From the ash, she carefully uncovers the turf she banked the night before. If all has gone well, there will still be living coals beneath the grey ash, glowing faintly orange in the darkness. She takes small pieces of kindling, dry twigs and splinters of wood, and arranges them carefully over the embers. She blows gently, steadily, coaxing life back into the fire. Smoke rises, making her eyes water. Then, a small flame licks up. Another. Soon, the kindling is crackling cheerfully. She adds larger pieces, building the fire slowly, patiently. This is not work to be rushed. A fire built too quickly, with wood piled carelessly, will smoke and sulk. But a fire built with care will burn cleanly and efficiently, giving maximum heat with minimum fuel. There is something meditative about this morning ritual. The darkness, the silence, the slow growth of light and warmth. Mary has done this thousands of times, and she will do it thousands more. It is simply what one does. The daily rhythm of the fire. Once the fire is properly established, Mary sets the great iron kettle on its hook over the flames. This kettle, black with age and use, is one of their most valuable possessions. Water for tea will be needed soon, and water must be kept warm throughout the day for cooking, for washing, for countless small tasks. The fire is never allowed to go completely out from October to April. To let the fire die would mean the difficult work of starting it again from scratch, with flint and steel or by borrowing coals from a neighbour. Better to maintain it, feeding it regularly, banking it carefully at night. During the day, the fire varies in intensity according to need. When Mary is cooking, she builds it up to a good blaze. When the family is sitting quietly in the evening, it burns lower, providing light and moderate warmth. At night, before bed, it is banked with turf and ash, settled down to smoulder slowly through the dark hours. The rhythm of the fire becomes the rhythm of the household. Time is measured by the fire. When do we eat? When the fire is right for cooking. When do we go to bed? When the fire is banked. When do we wake? When the fire must be rebuilt. Cooking by the hearth or food is prepared at this fire. There is no other option. Mary's skill in cooking here is considerable, for it requires judgment and experience. The heat is not even or easily controlled. Different parts of the hearth have different temperatures. The center, directly over the flames, is hottest. The sides are cooler. The stones to either side of the opening retain heat and can be used for keeping food warm. Mary has an iron pot with 3 legs that can stand in the coals. She has a long-handled frying pan. She has the great kettle. She has a griddle for oatcakes. She has pot hooks of different lengths, allowing her to hang pots at different heights above the fire, thus controlling the heat. Breakfast is usually simple. Bread baked once or twice a week, and perhaps some butter if they have any. Tea, weak and barely sweet, for sugar is expensive. Sometimes porridge, made from oats, cooked slowly in the iron pot. Dinner, the main meal, comes in early afternoon. Stew is common, vegetables from their small garden, perhaps a bit of bacon or salt pork if they are fortunate, potatoes, onions, carrots. The stew pot hangs over the fire for hours, the contents bubbling gently, filling the cottage with rich, savoury smells. Supper is lighter, bread and cheese, more tea, perhaps some cold meat from dinner if there is any left. The fire is never idle. Something is always cooking, or water is being heated, or a pot of glue is being melted for Thomas to mend something. The hearth is the engine that drives the household. Light and shadow. The fire also provides light, though not much. On the darkest winter evenings, the fire creates a circle of warm, flickering light that extends perhaps 8 or 10 feet into the room. Beyond that, shadows gather thick and deep. The family has 1 or 2 rushlights. Rushes dipped in tallow that can be lit for additional illumination. But these are used sparingly, for making them is laborious and tallow is precious. Mostly, they live by firelight, and they have arranged their lives to accommodate this limitation. They sit close to the fire in the evening. Old Meg has her place on the settle, nearest to the warmth. Thomas sits on a wooden stool, smoking his clay pipe. The tobacco a rare luxury he allows himself in small amounts. Mary sits on another stool, mending clothes by the firelight, her needle moving with practiced ease, despite the dim illumination. Young Tom and Alice sit on the floor, playing quiet games or listening to stories. The baby, William, sleeps in his cradle, which has been brought down from the bedroom and placed near the fire where he can be kept warm. Shadows dance on the walls. The fire crackles and pops. Outside, the wind begins to rise. But inside, in this circle of light and warmth, there is safety. The people of 18th century rural England did not have the luxury of turning up a thermostat. Instead, they relied on careful layering of clothing and on garments specifically designed to trap body heat. Let us examine in detail how the Thatcher family dressed for the cold. Thomas's work clothes. Thomas Thatcher owns few clothes, but what he has is practical and well suited to his life. His wardrobe consists of a linen shirt, off-white with age and washing. It is long, reaching to mid-thigh with full sleeves. This shirt is worn next to his skin year-round. In winter, he might wear 2 shirts, one over the other, if the cold is particularly bitter. Woolen stockings, hand-knitted by Mary, reaching above his knees. These stockings are thick and warm, made from good local wool with its natural lanolin still present. The lanolin provides some water resistance and helps keep his feet dry. Breeches, made of heavy wool, dark brown in colour. These fasten at the knee over his stockings. They are worn and patched, but still serviceable. A long waistcoat, also wool, with many buttons down the front. This garment comes nearly to his knees and provides an extra layer of warmth over his shirt. Over this, on the coldest days, a coat, what some might call a greatcoat, made of thick wool. This coat is old, older than Thomas's marriage to Mary. It was his father's coat, and before that, his grandfather's. It has been mended many times, with patches upon patches, but it still keeps out the wind and cold. On his head, a knit cap pulled down over his ears. On his hands, when he can spare them from work, woolen mittens that Mary made. On his feet, heavy leather boots, hobnailed at the sole for durability. These boots are his pride, for leather is expensive, and these were made by the village cobbler. He treats them with tallow to keep them supple and water resistant. When Thomas works outside, and he does, even in winter, for farm labour does not stop when it is cold. He moves slowly and steadily, keeping his blood flowing, generating heat through movement. He has learned not to rush, not to sweat, for wet clothing in cold weather is dangerous. Mary's clothing is different from Thomas's, but follows the same principle. Layers that trap warm air, natural fibers that breathe, careful attention to covering all extremities. She wears a long linen shift as her undermost garment. Over this, she wears petticoats, usually 2 or 3 in winter, made of wool or flannel. These petticoats are full and heavy, reaching to her ankles. Her skirt is wool, dark blue, heavy and thick. Her bodice is also wool, fitted snugly, with long sleeves. Over this, in the coldest weather, she wears an additional jacket or shortened cape. On her head, indoors, she wears a linen cap. Outdoors, She adds a woolen hood that covers her head and shoulders. Her hands are almost never idle, and she rarely wears gloves inside, but she has a pair of knitted mittens for outdoor work, fetching water from the well, feeding the chickens, visiting a neighbor. Her feet are shod in sturdy leather shoes, and she wears the same thick woolen stockings as Thomas. Her legs are always covered, always warm. The children's garments young Tom dresses much like his father, though his clothes are smaller and more worn, having been passed down or made from cut-down adult garments. Alice wears miniature versions of her mother's clothing: shift, petticoats, wool skirt and bodice, cap, shawl. Her clothes are patched and mended, for children are hard on clothing, but Mary keeps them clean and serviceable. Little William, being only 2, is dressed in long gowns that cover his legs and feet completely. He wears a cap day and night, for it was believed that babies needed to keep their heads warm to stay healthy. When he is carried outside, Mary wraps him in an additional blanket, holding him close to her body so her own warmth can keep him warm. The shawl. A woman's constant companion, Mary's shawl deserves special mention, for it is never far from her shoulders. This shawl is made of wool, large and square, and it can be wrapped around her shoulders, over her head, across her chest, wherever warmth is needed. When she nurses baby William, she drapes the shawl around both of them, creating a warm tent. When she works at the fire and feels a draft from the window, she pulls the shawl more tightly around her shoulders. When she sits in the evening, the shawl becomes a blanket across her lap. The shawl is versatile, sensual, beloved. It was a wedding gift from her mother, and Mary treasures it. Old Meg's special needs Old Meg, being elderly and feeling the cold more keenly, dresses more warmly than anyone else in the family. She wears multiple layers, 3 or 4 petticoats, 2 shifts, an extra shawl wrapped around her shoulders and fastened with a pin. Her place on the settle, nearest the fire, is acknowledged by all as her due. She spends much of the day there, knitting or spinning, contributing to the household work while staying warm. Mary makes special efforts to ensure her mother stays warm, for she knows that cold can be particularly dangerous for the elderly. At night, Mary fills a stone bottle with hot water from the kettle and tucks it into Old Meg's bed to warm the sheets before she climbs in. As evening deepens into night, the Thatcher family begins the ritual of preparing for sleep. This is not a quick process. It requires planning and effort, for the upstairs bedrooms are unheated and bitterly cold on winter nights. Heating the bed warmers. Long before bedtime, Mary places several large stones near the fire, among the hot coals at the edge of the hearth. These stones, smooth river rocks, each about the size of 2 fists, will heat slowly over the course of the evening, storing thermal energy. She also has a copper bed warmer, a flat pan with a long wooden handle and a hinged lid. This device can be filled with hot coals from the fire and used to warm the sheets directly. It is one of their more valuable possessions, for not every family has such a thing. About half an hour before bed, when the stones are thoroughly heated, Mary wraps each one carefully in old cloth, several layers of fabric to prevent burns, and carries them upstairs. One goes into old Meg's bed, tucked near the foot where it will warm her cold feet all night. Two go into the bed that Thomas and Mary share with baby William, one at the foot and one near the middle. Young Tom and Alice share a bed in the second upstairs room. Their room is even colder than their parents' room, for it faces north and gets no sun even in daytime. Mary places a wrapped hot stone in their bed as well, right in the center where both children can benefit from its warmth. She returns downstairs and fills the copper bed warmer with glowing coals from the fire. Then she carries it carefully upstairs, sliding it between the sheets of each bed in turn, moving it back and forth to distribute the heat evenly. The sheets, cold and damp from a day's exposure to winter air, gradually warm and dry. This process takes time, but it is essential. Climbing into a warmed bed is one of the great comforts of winter life. Climbing into a cold, damp bed is miserable and can even be dangerous. People have died from the cold, particularly the old, the very young, and the sick. Undressing and the final fire. Tending the family undresses by the hearth downstairs. This is warmer than undressing in the cold bedrooms. Each person removes their day clothes and puts on their night clothes, long linen nightshirts for Thomas and young Tom, nightgowns for Mary, old Meg, and Alice. Little William, being so young, sleeps in his day clothes more often than not. Thomas makes the final check of the fire. He adds large pieces of wood and several turfs, then covers the fire with ash, not so much as to smother it, but enough to slow its burning. If done correctly, coals will remain alive beneath the ash until morning. He checks the door to ensure it is securely latched. He peers out the small window at the night. Perhaps snow is falling, soft and silent. Perhaps the stars are sharp and bright in a clear, freezing sky. He marks the weather, thinking about tomorrow's work. One by one, holding candles, the family makes their way upstairs, the bedroom and its comforts. The bedroom that Thomas and Mary share with baby William is small and low-ceilinged. The thatch is visible overhead, and in winter, frost sometimes forms on the underside of the thatch, creating delicate white patterns. Their breath makes clouds in the cold air. Mary moves quickly, not wanting to lose heat. The bed, a substantial wooden frame with ropes strung across it to support a mattress, is the room's dominant feature. The mattress is stuffed with straw and feathers, lumpy but serviceable. On top of this are several wool blankets and a coverlet that Mary's grandmother made. Mary slides into bed first, holding baby William. The heated stone radiates warmth at the foot of the bed. The sheets, warmed by the bed warmer, feel gloriously comfortable. Thomas climbs in beside her, and they arrange the blankets carefully, tucking them in around the edges to trap warm air underneath. William nurses, then falls asleep between his parents. Mary can feel the rise and fall of his small chest, his baby warmth adding to the warmth of the bed. In the other room, young Tom and Alice have already burrowed under their blankets, huddled together for shared warmth. Their heated stone glows at the foot of their bed. Old Meg, in her small bed in the corner of Thomas and Mary's room, settles in with a sigh of relief. Her stone is positioned perfectly, warming her feet, easing the ache in her joints. The night is long in winter. The sun sets early, by 4 o'clock in December, and does not rise until well after 7 in the morning. That is 15 hours of darkness, much of it spent in bed, for there is no point in being up and using precious candles or lamp oil when one can be warm and resting. The house settles into quietness. The wind howls around the eaves. Snow might tap against the window, or rain might drum on the thatch. But inside, under layers of wool blankets, the family sleeps. The heated stones will stay warm for several hours, long enough for the family to fall into deep sleep. By morning, the stones will be cold, but by then, the family will be ready to rise and begin the day again. In the 18th century, privacy as we understand it today was virtually unknown among the rural poor. Entire families slept in close proximity, and this crowding, while uncomfortable in some ways, provided significant warmth during the cold months. Let us examine this aspect of winter survival. Sleeping arrangements. As we have noted, the Thatcher family's sleeping arrangements are compact. The parents share a bed with their youngest child. The 2 older children share another bed. Old Meg has her own small bed, a concession to her age and the family's respect for her. But it is in the same room as Thomas and Mary. These arrangements might seem cramped by modern standards, but they were normal for the time. Indeed, many families were even more crowded, with 4 or 5 children in a single bed, or with extended family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all living under one roof. The warmth generated by multiple bodies sleeping in proximity is considerable. A bed shared by 2 or 3 people is significantly warmer than a bed occupied by a single person. Body heat is trapped under the blankets, creating a warm microclimate that persists through the night. Young Tom and Alice, sleeping together, often wake in the morning, tangled together like puppies, having unconsciously sought each other's warmth during the night. This is natural, instinctive, and entirely practical. The question of modesty. We might wonder about modesty in such close quarters. In fact, modesty was understood differently in the 18th century. People were accustomed to shared spaces, to dressing and undressing in the presence of family members, to the sounds and smells of human life lived in close proximity. Night clothes provided a layer of propriety. Everyone wore long nightshirts or nightgowns. Bodies were covered. Private functions were handled discreetly, with chamber pots kept under beds for nighttime necessity. There was, in general, less emphasis on individual privacy and more emphasis on family unity and communal survival. The family was a unit, working together, living together, sleeping together. This was simply how life was lived. Warmth beyond the household sometimes. In the very coldest weather, families would bring animals inside for the night. A cow or a sheep kept in the parlour or in a lean-to attached to the house, would generate significant heat. This was not uncommon, and while it added to the smells and sounds of the night, it also added precious warmth. The thatchers do not keep animals in the house, but their neighbours, the millers, sometimes bring their sheep into a small room off their kitchen when the weather is particularly severe. The sheep's body heat radiates through the thin wall, warming the kitchen on the other side. This practice of sharing space with animals is ancient, going back hundreds or thousands of years. It is practical, efficient, and effective. Winter days are short, and there is still work to be done, both inside and outside. Let us observe how the Thatcher family manages their daily tasks while staying as warm as possible. Thomas's outdoor work farm labour does not stop for winter. Animals must still be fed and tended. Fences must be repaired. Tools must be maintained. Fields must be prepared for spring planting. Thomas works for a local farmer, Squire Hartley, and he is expected to work most days, weather permitting. His labour earns him a few shillings a week, plus occasional perks, a bag of grain, a portion of meat when an animal is slaughtered, permission to collect dead wood from the squire's land. On a typical winter workday, Thomas rises in the dark, dresses in his warmest clothes, and eats a quick breakfast by the fire. Then he walks to the squire's farm, a distance of about a mile, as arriving shortly after dawn. The work is hard and cold. He might spend the day repairing stone walls, his hands numb despite his mittens. He might thresh grain in a drafty barn, the work warming him through activity. He might spread manure on the fields, walking behind a cart, the smell sharp in the cold air. He works steadily, keeping moving to generate heat. He stops briefly at midday to eat the bread and cheese Mary packed for him, washing it down with cold water from his flask. Then he works on until dusk, when he walks home again, tired and cold, looking forward to the warmth of the fire. Mary's indoor domain. Mary's work is no less demanding, but it is at least warm, for she spends most of her time near the hearth. Her days are filled with countless small tasks: cooking, cleaning, washing clothes, a laborious process involving heating water, scrubbing with harsh soap, rinsing, wringing, and hanging the wet clothes near the fire to dry. In winter, clothes take days to dry completely, and the cottage is always festooned with damp laundry. Mending. She mends everything: clothes, linens, anything with fabric. Her needle is rarely idle. Patches are carefully cut and sewn. Tears are darned. Buttons are replaced. Nothing is thrown away if it can be repaired. Spinning. When there is time, Mary spins wool into thread. They have a small flock of sheep, 3 sheep, owned collectively with several neighbours. And Mary receives a portion of the wool when they are sheared each spring. This wool must be cleaned, carded and spun. It is slow, meditative work, and it can be done while sitting by the fire. Caring for the children. William requires constant attention. He must be fed, changed, entertained, kept from the fire and other dangers. Alice helps with him, learning skills she will need when she has her own children someday. Mary rarely leaves the cottage in winter. There is too much work inside, and venturing out means putting on all her outer garments, a process that takes time and effort. But sometimes she must go out to fetch water from the well, to feed the chickens, to visit a sick neighbor, or attend church on Sunday. When she does venture out, she wraps herself thoroughly and moves quickly, grateful to return to the warm kitchen. The children's contributions, young in Thompson at 12, is old enough to do real work. In summer, he works alongside his father in the fields. In winter, he helps in different ways, chopping kindling, fetching water, tending the chickens, helping his grandfather with odd jobs around the cottage. He attends dame school on some winter afternoons, when the weather permits, learning to read and write and cipher. The dame school is held in an old woman's cottage, and a dozen children crowd into her small front room, sitting on benches, practicing their letters on slates. It is cold there too, for the schoolmistress cannot afford much fuel, but at least there is a small fire. Alice, at 10, is her mother's shadow. She learns by watching and helping. She can already cook simple meals, mend clothes with the neat stitches, and care for her baby brother. She feeds the chickens, scatters their grain, collects their eggs, when there are any, for chickens lay fewer eggs in winter. Both children understand that they are part of the household economy. Their work matters. They are not idle and they are not indulged. They are young members of a working family, learning the skills they will need for their own adult lives. Old Meg's contributions, even old Meg, despite her age and stiff joints, contributes what she can. She cannot do heavy work, but she can knit. She can spin. She can shell peas or peel potatoes, or watch over baby William while Mary steps outside. She tells stories to the children in the evening, stories from her own childhood, stories from the old days. Her presence is valuable in other ways too. She has a lifetime of knowledge about healing herbs, about weather signs, about managing a household, t'danir. When Alice has a cough, old Meg knows which herbs to brew into a tea. When the bread doesn't rise properly, old Meg knows what went wrong. She is a repository of wisdom, and the family values her for that. The diet of an 18th-century rural family in winter was simple, repetitive, and heavily based on preserved foods. Fresh vegetables were rare. Meat was occasional. But the food was nourishing, and much of it could be cooked slowly over the fire, adding to the warmth of the cottage. Let us explore their winter meals in detail. Bread, the staff of life. Bread is the foundation of every meal. Mary bakes bread once or twice a week, a process that takes most of a day and fills the cottage with wonderful smells. She makes her bread from a mixture of wheat flour and rye flour. Wheat alone would be too expensive, too fine for their budget. The rye gives the bread a denser texture and a slightly sour taste, but it is hearty and filling. The process of baking is complex. First, she must prepare the dough the night before, mixing flour with water, salt, and a piece of sourdough starter saved from the last baking. This mixture sits overnight in a wooden trough, covered with a cloth, rising slowly in the warmth near the hearth. In the morning, she kneads the dough, a hard physical task that warms her oven on the coldest day. She shapes the dough into loaves, then lets them rise again. Baking requires careful management of the fire. Mary builds up the fire with plenty of wood until the hearthstones are thoroughly heated. Then she sweeps the coals aside and places her loaves directly on the hot stones. She covers them with a large iron dome called a baking cloche, then heaps hot coals on top of and around the cloche. The bread bakes in this even heat, bottom and top simultaneously, emerging crusty and golden. Each loaf is precious. A loaf must last several days, feeding the entire family. As the bread ages, it becomes harder, but it is still good. Dipped in broth, toasted by the fire, or softened with milk. Pottage and stew. The pot hanging over the fire is rarely empty. In it simmers pottage, a thick soup or thin stew that is the mainstay of the winter diet. The base is water or broth, made from bones saved from whenever the family last had meat. To this, Mary adds whatever vegetables they have. Onions from the string hanging in the pantry, carrots and turnips from the root cellar, dried peas or beans, perhaps some barley or oats to thicken it. If they are lucky, there might be a piece of bacon or salt pork to add flavor. This meat is so heavily salted that it must be soaked before use, but it adds a richness to the pottage that makes it more satisfying. The pottage cooks slowly, for hours, the ingredients melding together into something nourishing and warming. The family eats it for dinner, ladled into wooden bowls, sopped up with bread. It warms them from the inside, and the heat of the cooking process warms the cottage, root vegetables. In the small root cellar beneath the cottage, a hole dug into the earth, lined with stones, and access through a trap door in the kitchen floor. The thatchers store their winter vegetables. Here, in the cool darkness, they keep potatoes, the miracle tuber that has transformed the diet of the poor over the past century. Potatoes are filling, nutritious, and store well. They can be boiled, roasted in the coals, or added to stews. Turnips and carrots, also sturdy and reliable. Onions, hanging in strings from the rafters. A few cabbages, though these will not keep as long as the root vegetables. These vegetables are the backbone of winter nutrition. They are not glamorous. They do not taste particularly exciting, but they keep hunger at bay, and that is what matters. Preserved foods in the pantry. A small cupboard built into the wall. Mary keeps her preserved foods. These are treasures, carefully husbanded. A crock of salted butter, covered with a cloth. A small cheese, aging slowly. A jar of honey, a rare luxury. Traded for eggs with a neighbor who keeps bees. Dried herbs, thyme, sage, parsley, gathered in summer and hung to dry. A bag of oats for porridge. A small sack of barley. These items are used sparingly, made to last through the long months until spring. Eggs and dairy, the chickens, huddled in their coop, lay fewer eggs in winter. A hen's laying is controlled by daylight hours, and with the short winter days, production drops significantly. The family might get 2 or 3 eggs a week if they are lucky. Each egg is precious. Sometimes Mary fries one for Thomas's breakfast, a special treat. Sometimes she uses them in baking. Sometimes she trades them with neighbors for things she needs. Milk, too, is less plentiful in winter. The cows give less milk, and what milk there is goes to making butter and cheese. The Thatchers do not own a cow. Cows are expensive, but they have an arrangement with a neighbor who does. In exchange for help with haying in summer, they receive a small weekly portion of milk in winter. Tea and simple pleasures tea. Real tea, imported from distant lands, is expensive, but Mary manages to acquire a little. She buys it from the village shop, a few ounces at a time, and uses it sparingly, brewing weak tea that is more about warmth and ritual than actual tea flavor. The family drinks this tea in the evening, sitting around the fire. It is one of the small pleasures that make winter bearable. The hot liquid warms their hands, their throats, their bellies. It costs little but means much. Sometimes, on a Sunday or a special occasion, there might be something extra, a bit of sugar for the tea, or a small piece of meat pie purchased from the baker, or a sweet biscuit. These treats are rare, which makes them all the more precious. Winter in the 18th century was not just uncomfortable, it was genuinely dangerous. Cold, damp conditions contributed to illness, and medical care was limited and often ineffective. Let us consider the health challenges the Thatcher family faces. The constant threat of cold. Despite their best efforts, the Thatchers are often cold. Their cottage, though well built by the standards of the time, is still drafty and damp. The cold seeps in through gaps around doors and windows, up through the floor, down from the uninsulated ceiling. Prolonged exposure to cold and damp can lead to various ailments. Chilblains, painful itching swellings on fingers, toes and ears caused by exposure to cold. Old Meg suffers from these particularly badly. Her fingers are often swollen and red, and she wraps them in warm cloth and holds them near the fire for relief. Coughs and colds, common winter afflictions. The entire family seems to take turns being ill with stuffy noses, sore throats, and persistent coughs. These illnesses are usually not serious, but they are miserable and can develop into more serious conditions. Rheumatism, joint pain exacerbated by cold and damp. Old Meg's hands and knees ache constantly in winter. She moves slowly, stiffly, and sometimes she cries out in pain when she tries to stand after sitting for a long time. Lung infections, bronchitis, pneumonia, and other respiratory illnesses that can be deadly, especially for the very young, the very old, and those already weakened by poor nutrition. Home remedies. Mary and Old Meg have a repertoire of home remedies that they use to treat common ailments. For coughs, a tea made from horehound a bitter herb that grows wild in the hedgerows. Honey, if they have any, makes the tea more palatable and soothes the throat. For chilblains, gentle warming by the fire, never sudden heat, which can make chilblains worse. Old Meg also rubs her hands with goose grease, which seems to provide some relief. For fevers, willowbark tea, which contains the natural precursor to aspirin. It is bitter and unpleasant, but it can reduce fever and pain. For general wellness, good food, warmth, rest. These are the most important medicines, though often the hardest to ensure. These remedies sometimes help, sometimes do not. The family knows that illness can turn serious quickly, and there is always an undercurrent of anxiety about health during winter. The loss of children, we must speak plainly about something that was all too common in the 18th century. The death of children. Many families lost children to illness, particularly in winter. Pneumonia, scarlet fever, whooping cough, and other diseases took a terrible toll. The Thatchers have been fortunate. Their 3 children have survived, though there were close calls. When Tom was a baby, he nearly died of a fever that lasted for days, and Mary sat up with him night after night, bathing his hot little body with cool water, praying desperately. He survived, but the memory of that fear never truly leaves her. Every mother in the village has similar stories. Some have worse ones, stories of children who did not survive. This constant awareness of mortality shapes how people live. They are practical, unsentimental in some ways, yet deeply loving. They know that life is fragile, especially in winter. The village healer. For serious illnesses, the family might seek help from the village healer, an old woman named Goody Parsons, who lives on the edge of the village. Goody Parsons knows much about herbs and healing, though her knowledge is a mix of genuine medicinal wisdom and folk superstition. She can set broken bones, lance boils, provide poultices and potions for various ailments. Sometimes her remedies work, sometimes they do not, but she is all that is available. The nearest physician is in the market town, 6 miles away. His services are far too expensive for families like the Thatchers. The importance of staying warm, the best medicine, as everyone knows, is prevention. Staying warm, staying dry, eating well. These are the keys to staying healthy through winter. This is why the family takes such care with their fire, their clothing, their sleeping arrangements. This is why Mary fusses over everyone, ensuring they are properly dressed before going outside, making sure they dry off immediately if they get wet. This is why Thomas works so hard in autumn to ensure they have sufficient fuel. Winter is a battle, and the prize is survival. No family survives winter alone. The Thatchers are part of a community, and that community shares resources, labour and warmth in various ways. Let us explore this aspect of winter life. Neighbourly support. The village is small, perhaps 50 families in total, and everyone knows everyone else. This closeness can be stifling at times, but it is also a source of strength, particularly in winter. When someone is ill, neighbours bring food, When someone needs help with a heavy task, neighbors provide labor. When someone is in trouble, the community rallies. The Millers, who live next door, are particular friends of the Thatchers. Sarah Miller and Mary Thatcher have known each other since childhood. They help each other constantly, watching each other's children, sharing food, borrowing tools, working together on large tasks like laundry or preserving food. In the depths of winter, when the cold is most bitter, Sarah might come over to the Thatcher's cottage to spend the afternoon. She brings her mending or her spinning, and the two women sit by the fire together, working and talking. This shared warmth, both physical and social, makes winter more bearable. The village well water must be fetched daily from the village well. This well, located in the center of the village near the church, is a gathering place, particularly for women. On a winter morning, several women might be at the well at the same time, waiting their turns to fill their buckets. They stand in the cold, stamping their feet and chatting, exchanging news and gossip. Who is ill? Who is expecting a baby? What the squire said to the vicar? What price the butcher is charging for meat? This daily gathering serves an important social function. It keeps people connected, informed, and aware of who might need help. Fetching water in winter is unpleasant work. The path to the well can be icy. The rope is cold and wet. The bucket is heavy when full. But it must be done, and Mary does it without complaint, usually bringing Alice along to help. Church on Sunday services at the village church are one of the few occasions when the entire community gathers indoors together. The church is cold. There is no heat except from the body warmth of the congregation. But it is still better than being outside. The Thatcher family walks to church each Sunday, dressed in their best clothes. The service is long, 2 hours or more, and the children struggle to sit still on the hard wooden pews. The vicar's sermon drones on, his breath making clouds in the cold air. But there is something comforting about the ritual, about being part of the congregation, about singing hymns together, about hearing the familiar words of the liturgy. It is a touchstone of normalcy in the long winter. After church, there is a brief period of socializing. The men gather in small groups, discussing weather and crops and politics. The women exchange greetings, inquire after each other's health, make plans to visit or help with tasks. The children run about, happy to be released from the constraints of the service. Then everyone trudges home through the cold, looking forward to their Sunday dinners, shared labor. Some tasks are too large for a single family to manage alone. In these cases, neighbors work together. For example, the autumn pig slaughter is a communal activity. Several families share the cost of purchasing a pig, then work together to slaughter and butcher it. Every part of the pig is used. The meat is divided among the families. The fat is rendered into lard. The bones are boiled for broth. The blood is made into pudding. Even the organs and intestines are utilized. This work must be done in cold weather, late autumn or early winter, so that the meat does not spoil. The families work together over the course of a day, and though the work is hard and messy, there is also satisfaction in it, and even a sense of celebration. Similarly, when someone's roof needs thatchings, neighbors help. When a fence is blown down in a storm, neighbors help repair it. When someone is too ill to work, neighbors step in to ensure essential tasks are completed. This mutual support is not charity. It is simply how rural communities function. Everyone helps everyone else, knowing that someday they will need help in return. Winter is long. Let us not pretend otherwise. From November to March is 5 months, more than a third of the year. The thatchers endure this time with patience, fortitude, and an understanding that winter, like everything else, will eventually end. December, the darkest month, December is hard. The days are at their shortest. The sun, when it appears at all, hangs low in the southern sky, providing little warmth. The nights are endless. The solstice comes and goes, almost unnoticed by the thatchers, who are not given to astronomical observations. But they sense, instinctively, that the days begin to grow longer, imperceptibly at first, then more noticeably as January arrives. Christmas is a brief, bright spot. The thatchers cannot afford elaborate celebrations, but Mary makes a special effort. She bakes a small cake using hoarded sugar and precious dried fruit. Thomas manages to obtain a bit of extra meat, a small piece of beef perhaps, or a goose if they are particularly fortunate. On Christmas Day, the family attends church, then returns home for their feast. It is modest by gentry standards, but to the thatchers it feels lavish. They eat until they are full, a rare sensation, and spend the afternoon sitting by the fire, drowsy and content. Old Meg tells the Christmas story as she remembers hearing it from her grandmother, embellishing it with details not found in the Bible but treasured nonetheless. The children listen, entranced. Even baby William seems to sense that this day is special. Then Christmas is over, and the long stretch of January and February lies ahead. January and February, the waiting, these are the hardest months. The initial novelty of winter has worn off. The stored food is dwindling. The wood supply is lower. Everyone is tired of being cold, tired of the same food day after day, tired of the confined space of the cottage. Tempers can be short. Thomas and Mary occasionally quarrel over small things. The children bicker. Old Meg retreats into silence, remembering other winters, other years. But they endure. What choice do they have? They keep the fire burning. They wear their layers. They eat their simple meals. They go to bed early and rise late, conserving energy, waiting for spring. Sometimes Thomas looks at his dwindling wood supply and worries. Will it be enough? If they have a late freeze, if winter extends into April, will they have sufficient fuel? He says nothing to Mary about these worries, but she sees the concern in his eyes and shares it, silently. Young Tom is growing. His appetite is enormous, and there never seems to be quite enough food. He is restless, energetic, Chafing at the confinement of winter, he wants to be outside, working, moving. But there is less work available in deep winter, and so he must make do with small tasks and long hours by the fire. Alice is quieter, more patient, but she too feels the strain. She misses being able to play outside freely. She misses the flowers and green-growing things. She misses the sun. Only baby William, too young to remember summer, seems unbothered by winter. He is warm, fed, loved, and that is all he knows. March, the first signs then. Gradually, things begin to change. The sun climbs higher in the sky. The days grow noticeably longer. The worst of the cold eases, though there can still be hard frosts and even snow. The first signs of spring appear, hesitant, tentative, but real nonetheless. A robin singing in the hedge, snowdrops pushing through the frozen earth, catkins on the hazel bushes. Thomas notices that the hens are beginning to lay more eggs. He sees buds on the trees beginning to swell. He smells a change in the air, something fresher, cleaner. The family's spirits lift. Spring is coming. Winter is not over yet, but its back is broken. They will make it through. Mary begins to think about spring cleaning, throwing open the windows, airing out the bedding, scrubbing away the grime and smoke of winter. But not yet. It is too soon. But she can think about it, plan for it, anticipate it. Old Meg spends more time sitting outside the cottage door on sunny afternoons, her face turned up to the weak sun like a flower seeking light. The warmth eases her rheumatism, and she seems more alive, more present. The children become irrepressible, running outside at every opportunity, even though it is still cold. They are done with confinement. They need movement, air, freedom. April. The return of warmth. By April, winter's grip has loosened significantly. There may still be cold days, even frosts, but the general trend is toward warmth. The fire in the hearth is allowed to burn lower during the day. The upstairs rooms are opened and aired out. The heavy winter clothes are put away, cleaned and stored for next year. The parlour is reopened. The curtain across the doorway is taken down, laundered and put away. Suddenly, the cottage feels larger, airier. Green things are growing everywhere. The hedgerows are thick with new leaves, wildflowers bloom in the meadows. The whole world seems to be waking up. Thomas's work becomes busier. Spring planting begins. He works long days, but he does not mind. He is warm, and the work feels purposeful after the idle waiting of winter. Mary opens all the windows, and fresh air flows through the cottage, banishing the stale smell of wood smoke and confined living. She beats the mattresses, washes the bedding, scrubs the floors. It feels like a rebirth. The food situation improves. Fresh greens can be gathered: nettles, wild garlic, dandelion leaves. The chickens lay more eggs. The cow gives more milk. There is a sense of abundance after the scarcity of winter. The Thatchers have survived another winter. They have come through tired, thinner perhaps, but alive and intact. The family is whole. The cottage still stands. They have enough food and fuel to reach the warm months. And that, in the end, is all that matters. We have travelled through winter with the Thatchers, observing their daily routines, their challenges, their methods of staying warm. What can we learn from this journey into the past? Perhaps we can appreciate the resilience of ordinary people who survived and even thrived in conditions we would find unbearable. They had no thermostats, no electric blankets, no instant hot water. Yet they managed, through careful preparation, communal support, and sheer determination. Their lives were hard, no doubt about that. But there was also a simplicity to them, a directness. The challenge was clear. Stay warm, stay fed, stay alive until spring. And they met that challenge year after year, generation after generation. We might also appreciate the value they placed on warmth itself. To us, warmth is so commonplace that we barely notice it. To them, it was precious, hard-won, carefully conserved. The fire on the hearth was not just a source of heat. It was the center of family life, the literal heart of the home. There is something almost meditative about their winter routines. The slow building of the fire each morning, the careful layering of clothing, the patient tending of small tasks throughout the long day, the ritualistic preparation for bed each night. These routines imposed order on a cold chaos, creating a sense of control and safety. And perhaps most importantly, there is the lesson of patience. Winter could not be hurried. It had to be endured day by day until it ended in its own time. The Thatchers knew this. They did not rage against winter or wish it away, though surely they sometimes wanted to. They simply lived through it, one day at a time, trusting that spring would come eventually. As we conclude our visit to their cottage, let us take one last look around. The fire on the hearth burns steadily, its light flickering on the stone walls. The family sits together, warm and safe, while outside the wind howls and the winter night presses close. They will be all right, these Thatchers. They have what they need. Each other. Their small cottage, their fire, their food, their determination. And in a few months, the birds will sing again, the flowers will bloom, and all of this, the cold, the darkness, the struggle, will seem like a distant memory. But for now, for tonight, it is enough to be warm, to be together, to be alive. Let us leave them in peace, sleeping under their wool blankets, dreaming perhaps of spring, secure in the knowledge that they will wake again when the fire must be rebuilt, and the long winter day must be lived through once more. Winter comes every year. It came to the Thatchers in the 18th century, just as it comes to us now, just as it came to people in the centuries before, and will come to people in the centuries after. The methods of staying warm have changed. We have technology that would seem like magic to the Thatchers, but the fundamental human need for warmth, for shelter, for safety remains the same. There is something comforting in this continuity, in knowing that people have always faced winter, always found ways to survive, always waited patiently for spring. Sleep now if you can. Let the story of the thatchers fade into the background of your thoughts. Imagine their cottage, warm and peaceful in the winter night. Imagine the fire burning low, the family sleeping soundly, the world quiet under its blanket of cold. Winter passes. Spring comes. Life goes on. This is the great truth that the thatchers knew, that we know, that everyone who has ever lived through winter knows. And with that thought, we leave them, and we drift into our own sleep, grateful for our own warmth, our own shelter, our own safety. Good night.